Today one of my students, Naoko, was showing me this website. This is a website of Japanese stencils. So these were used on, I believe they're used on like cloth. So this is a way to like dye and stencil cloth. We were looking at this and she was trying to figure out how to go about scraping this and how to like get these images. And I think this is a great example of, this is a perfect use case for something like Beautiful Soup. So I thought this would be a good chance for me to record a video on how to use Beautiful Soup. So Beautiful Soup is like it's a Python API that allows you to integrate with web pages and basically like scrape the HTML content of a web page. So basically we can scrape the HTML content, but what we're going to actually do is look for just the images and download the images from there. So a couple of reasons, and we'll start with just sort of like describing why I think this is a really great use case for someone like Beautiful Soup. So, you know, I've showed a lot of different scraping tools and that sort of thing, and many of them are built for specific sites, but a lot of times you'll come across a website like this, and you'll sort of be like, well, there's a lot here. How do I get all the things here without going through 862 images one by one and downloading those images? This is great because this is a pretty straightforward, just sort of list of thumbnails, and then there's pagination here to go page to page. So when I click skip, we'll see it at the URL it says skip 30. So first off, knowing the URL has like a pattern that I can follow, which it will just be like, add 30 until I hit whatever I need to. I think actually I can see what the end is to the end would be skip equals 840. So this will sort of just like help me sort of know like, okay, I can write some loop that adds 30 every time and gets me a new URL. The next great thing here is that it's also a pattern where if I click on the thumbnail itself, I'm taken to a web page, and if I click on that web page itself, I get a URL of a pretty like high-res image, but that URL also looks like it relates to the URL of the page itself, right? So if I go to the page, I see this. So all this tells me is that this is a very like pattern-based website, which means it's going to be really easy for me to write some code to match that pattern and then download the images that it finds in sort of the end of the pattern, right? So the pattern would essentially would be start on a URL that looks like this, and every loop between 1 and 8 or 0 and 840, adding 30 every time, and append that to the URL, and then take all of the thumbnails we see on this page and grab the page associated link with each of those, and then go to that page, which in many cases will be a page like this. So we see a URL here. So take that URL and then apply that, then like find the image that is associated with the anchor link here. So that's basically what we're going to write. So that'll take us a little bit of time. I've written most of it already just to make sure that it worked the way I expected it to. But I'll walk you through the steps and the path of this. Now there's many different ways you could write this. If you're looking at this, you're seeing the pattern here is actually more built around these. So maybe you actually want to do a loop and look at just this numbering system. That could work. What I like about a system like this is that I know that whatever is on these pages is what I'm scraping, rather than scraping what might be other crap. So like, not everyone is as consistent as these folks seem to be in terms of just like this whole setup. So other pages might be different names or might not be a number system. So this will be a little bit more of a generic example of how to do that, but you could find probably better patterns within this actual page. One thing to note is it is really helpful if you know a little bit of HTML in order to use Beautiful Soup. What we're basically going to do is we're going to take these pages, and we've got the URLs, but then we need to basically break things down by their HTML DOM structure. So I recommend that if you just like Google HTML DOM or HTML DOM elements, you might find like a 30-minute video that'll sort of explain a lot of this to you. What we're going to look for here is when we look at the inspection tools, and you can find that usually in Chrome by turning on your developer tools. Again, I would recommend Googling that if you're not sure. And then we're going to go through sort of this list and sort of see like, okay, what I actually started was I started by trying to grab just the UL, which is this results list, and then parse down to LI, and then parse down to A. It turns out that's a little bit messy. It turns out this A has a class of a thumbnail. So all we're going to do is we're just going to look at the entire page and just grab all A tags with thumbnail. It works fine for this site. It might not work as well for other sites. And this is sort of the challenge of Beautiful Soup is you're kind of writing a script generically for every like URL rather than like trying to generate like an overall like page scraper. There are some page scrapers I've seen that just sort of like run through the entire page and just grab every image. In this case, that actually won't work for us because these images on these pages are thumbnail sized images. So they're not as high res as the final images we want are. So we're going to run through this script in order to get those final really high res images. And that'll be better than sort of a generic image scraper that just looks at every image tag on the page and just pulls down whatever. Your mileage may vary. You may find that a certain tool works better for a certain site, whereas this is pretty custom. You know, this probably would have taken me about an hour to write all this code and double check it and make sure it worked to run the script. I certainly would recommend that for something that has 850 some items on it, because that's certainly going to be less time for me than it would be to go through and download every image. But let's say there were 50 images on this page. I might just be like, well, I'll just go and download all of them by hand, because realistically writing that code might take just as long. So again, it's important to sort of think about how you balance out your time of writing a script to do something versus just doing it manually. And for some of you who maybe don't know HTML as well, or maybe don't know code as well, it may still make sense to, like, even if there's 100 or 150 images, it may still make sense to just sort of like download those. Or maybe you want to learn a little bit more about this and just want to commit to doing the time to sort of learn how to write a scraper. So that's sort of it for this demo in terms of just like getting set up. Let's jump over to getting Beautiful Soup installed, and then we will also get started with writing our first scraper. Okay, now I'm inside of my terminal window. I'm going to assume that everyone has already installed Anaconda. If you haven't installed Anaconda, I really recommend you do. I have a video on how to do it, which I will link to inside of the video description. But in general, just having an Anaconda or some environment set up is going to be really important, especially if you're on a Mac. Highly recommend you're using Anaconda if you're on a Mac. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to build our first Beautiful Soup environment, just so that we have a place to begin to install code and that sort of things. So I'm going to type in conda create. I'm going to give it a name. Let's call it bs-demo, name notwithstanding. And then I want to set the Python version. I always set the Python version at 3.7 just out of habit. You could set it to 3.8, do whatever you want to do. I think Beautiful Soup will work fine no matter what. I'm just going to go ahead and do this. And we're going to say yes. So we're going to install, this just installs a bunch of baseline things we're going to need. So it usually takes a little bit of time to get set up. Cool, so now we're set up. So now we want to do this first line, which is conda activate bs demo. This is just going to activate this environment. And now we want to install Beautiful Soup. So the first thing we're going to do is, you can come over to the Beautiful Soup documentation. I just Googled this, and this is what showed up. We want to use the pip version. You can skip this now if you just want to follow along with me. But there's a lot of good information on this in this documentation if you're interested. Pip install Beautiful Soup 4. The reason you need Beautiful Soup 4 is there were many versions previous. We want the latest version. So we're going to do pip install Beautiful Soup 4. And it looks like we're missing a couple things here. So looks like we're missing request and then click. So let's install these as well. So let's just do pip install request. So request is a library that allows us to do URL requests. I don't know what click is, but let's just install it anyway. Cool. So now we have everything we need to install, or all the software we need to install. So now we're going to actually go ahead and start writing some code. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to create a new folder. This folder can sort of live everywhere. It's just like helpful to have it in one place in one time. So I'm just going to go ahead and create a new Finder window. Let's go ahead and name this. So I usually have a folder in my user files that's just BS4 scripts. And then I like to name, so you'll see here, I might have done this video, recorded this video for some folks in one of my runway classes that was installing tartan scripts. I might have gone through that, but this will be a little bit more in depth. So generally name your folder like whatever website you're scraping. That way you sort of know if you've already have one similar, or it might also help other people if they are looking for something similar. And then you're going to want, I would recommend creating a folder called output. We're just going to create a folder. We're going to download all of our images directly to that folder. And then you just create a file, a Python file named dx, like that matches whatever your website is. So in this case, it's dh-jac, and this is a .py file. Cool. So I already have like most of this already set up. I'm just going to comment a bunch of stuff out and walk through everything. So let's get started. All right, so we're ready to start our web scraper. I have the website open. I always recommend having the website open while you're writing in the code, just because you want to bounce back and forth between sort of like checking your work and then writing a little bit of code and then making sure it does everything you want it to. The other thing you want to do is I recommend having the Beautiful Soup documentation open. I often forget how little commands work, so I'll often have the docs open next to it, just so I can like search for, how do I find a child or a parent or that sort of thing. So you can go ahead and just do that now. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to open up your file. I recommend using Sublime Text. It's really easy to use. There's also Visual Code, which is a new thing, or I guess is really old for Microsoft actually. People have different elements of what they use, so check those out. Make our type a little bit bigger here, so maybe it's easier to see on YouTube. Okay, at the very top of your page, I definitely recommend you just add these pretty much for every project you work on. So import requests from BS4, which is Beautiful Soup. You're going to import the Beautiful Soup library, import string, and import OS, or from OS import path. This is going to allow us to just do some double checking with our paths as we download images. Okay, so the most simple thing you can do with requests, first of all, is you're going to actually want to start with just the page URL. So we're going to say page equals request.get and then whatever the URL is. So in this case, I already added in the skip equals 0. If you go back and forth in this page, you'll end up with a thing that says skip equals 0 if you're on the very first page. So once we have the system that's going to request that page, then we want to go ahead and we want to say print what is the page status. So the reason we want the page status code is that we just want to make sure that that this URL works with our scraper, and we should get back like a status code of like 200 instead of 404 or anything. This just sort of helps to make sure that everything is working the way we want it to. So to run this, we're going to go into terminal, and we are going to so we've got BS demo open already. We're going to go back to our Finder, and we're going to click on the folder we're in, hit Command C, just copy the path, and then CD into that path. Then we're going to type Python, and then we're going to start our command by DH dash, and we're just going to hit Tab. This is the command you're going to run. So we're going to run this multiple times just to make sure the info that we're getting back is what we want. So we're going to go ahead and write, let's just run this once and make sure that we get a solid response back. We should look for a response of 200. And I didn't get anything. Let's see why. Possibly because I didn't save this. Yep, I didn't save this file. So save it, and then come back to terminal and hit up, and then hit run. And I got a code of 200, which means that it was accessible. So that's great. Next, so we've now got the page access. So what we're going to use, this is the first command of Beautiful Soup. So we're going to write soup equals beautiful soup, and then page.content, and we're going to use the HTML parser. If this were like an XML file or something, you would use the XML parser. But basically, we've already got the page, right, through our request, and we want the content of the page. So let's go ahead and print this out and see what it looks like. It is going to be a bunch of HTML. We will not use this very often, but it's just helpful to sort of see what it looks like when you run this through the terminal. Now, I'm also going to turn off the page 200. As I go through this page, I'm going to be turning things on and off just because if I'm already getting what I want out of this, I don't really want to keep spitting it out just because it's going to make the page in terminal longer and longer to read. So let's go ahead and make sure I save this and come back and hit up and then hit run. So you'll see here, this is all of the HTML of the page, right? So if I were to actually go back to the web page and I were to go view, inspect, I would see all of the exact same code source here. So this is just telling me that like this page.content is returning what I expect it to. And you want to use the .prettify just to make sure that it's all being formatted correctly. Otherwise, it might be kind of soupy. Pun intended, I guess, at this point. So this is now working. So now what we need to do is we need to actually go in and we need to figure out what our links are. So I already explained that a little bit of like an interesting challenge here was that I thought I could start with like result list. This is how it normally work in JavaScript. I would do like dot result list parent or like child li and then child la. But in this case, it turns out they already have a class on all of the anchor tags that we want. So we're gonna look for all of the a elements using the class of thumbnail. So the way to do that is I'm gonna say links equals, and I'm gonna say soup.findAll. So find all on this page with the tag of a and the class of thumbnail. And the formatting for this is kind of funky. Make sure that you see that is class underscore equals thumbnail. If you're used to writing jQuery or something else and you're used to like a dot thumbnail sort of like find all, this is a little bit different than that. So make sure that you have the formatting set up correctly. So let's go ahead and actually just print out what our links are. And actually, we don't want just the links. This will give us the entire tag. So what we actually want is links.get.href. So we want just what is, if we look at our formatting here, we want just what's in this URL pattern. So let's go ahead and do that. So come to the end here and we'll hit up. Link is not defined. That's because it is links, not link. Right, okay. So this is one of the things, you can't just say links.get because this is an array or a list and we want to get this from a single element. So we're actually gonna run through the loop here. So this is, if you've never seen for loops like this is just a simple for loop of how links work in, a for loop in Python. So we're just gonna say, of all of the elements in links, we're gonna name them link. So we're gonna like iterate through that list. And then we're just gonna say print out the link. So the individual link from here with get href. So let's run this. Cool. So here you will see that I have a URL pattern for all of, I guess there's what, 30 here? Is that right? Let's see if we do print len, which is short for length, and then links. Yes, we have 30 of them. So this is great. So we're all set here to now run through our links. So again, the idea here is that we want to go through every page and we want to grab the link URL and then we want to go to that page and we want to grab the image from it. So in this case, you might have noticed that I haven't gone through every single page yet. I'm only going through for that first page. So what I like to do is I like to make sure that like a single page works before I start looping through things. It's just going to help reduce like kind of the craziness of, or like the complexity of these structures. So at this point, we've got our link. So now what we want to do is we want to create a bunch of subpages. We want to go to those subpages and we want to hit the individual links from there. So let's go up here. Let's say subpages. Actually, I guess we want to do it here. We'll do so we're going to create a page of subpages. And I guess at the top here, I can say subpages equals a list. We're going to say subpages.append, and we're going to say link.gethref, and then we're going to say split. And we're going to split at, let me look at what our pattern was here. So our pattern was equal. So this is great. So what we really want from this, you'll see that this pattern is the exact same on every page. But what we really want is just this first pattern. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, take the link and split it at the equal sign and take the second half. So this is 0-based index. So if it were 0, you would say take the first half. But because we want the second half, we're going to say at the second half, take this. So what we can do now So now we've got our subpages here. So let's just do one last print to make sure that we're not losing our minds, and also realize this indentation is broken. So print, and then we're just going to say print. Actually, we need to do this for subpages each. Sorry, this is not going to work. So we'll do this down here. And we will say for subpage in subpages, print subpages or subpage. Right, so this is going to give us all of the, this should just give us this in a list. And I'm going to turn off this and this, so we have less output to our screen. Press up. And sure enough, now we just have this list. Perfect. So now we're going to go through those pages, and we're going to get all the image off of those pages. So here again, we want to do, we're going to do subpage equals, and we need to update this URL. So we want to go, let's go ahead and just click on this. So we're going to go here. We're going to click on this. And this is the URL pattern, right? So the pattern is this. And then we want to say, we can either do a plus sign or we could do a string format. I think for this, the plus sign will be fine. So subpage. And then let's just grab the soup from this. So again, we're going to say soup equals beautiful soup. Actually, let's do sp underscore. So this is subpage soup equals subpage.content using the HTML parser. And then what we want to do is we want to say on that page, let's grab all images of sp soup and find all. And again, there's a class here. So if we inspect this, you'll see that we actually want we don't want the image itself, because this is the low res version of this. We want the URL on the anchor tag. So here again, we want the a tag, but we want the class of image. So come back over here and we'll look at a class equals image. So that should give me all of my images. So I'm going to come back up here and add images equals. And then, so now we want to say for image in images. And I'm trying to think about what we want. So again, we want the href. So we're going to do image dot, or we're going to print image dot get href. So we'll turn off our print for subpages, and we just want yes, we'll do this. And this should give me just the URLs for all those images. Now you notice this is getting pretty slow, right? Because it's parsing through a number of different URLs. So when I started on just that top page, I was getting just the very first page. Now I'm getting first page plus all 30 pages below it and doing all that parsing. And unless I broke something here, this should be working the way I expect it to. I should get back a list of URLs for all of the images. Let's see. Oh, yes, I did break this. The reason I broke this is I said images equals. But what I really want is, yes, what I really want is here, we're going to go images, say image underscore link equals that. Then I want to do images dot append, and I just want the image link dot href. Cool. So now if I just print image, I should get the entire URL. result set has no attribute get. Did you call find all? Did call find all. Image links. Right, so now I need to run over any image links I find. So for image links, image link in image links. Then we're going to append this. So remember that this is a list, and you can't just grab from this. It's not like NumPy where you can just grab everything from a list and append it to this. So we need to do a for loop into this list to get each individual element. And then we're going to take this link and append it to the images list. This is a little confusing. Maybe I should have read through this before doing this video, but we'll see. If this doesn't work, I'll stop and figure out what the hell I did wrong. Cool. Okay, let me stop the video and figure out what I'm doing wrong here. All right, it turns out I actually did nothing wrong. It's just a very, very slow scrape. It actually did end up outputting almost as soon as I stopped the video, of course. So this does work. It's slow, and that's like part of sort of realizing that these web scrapers, especially when you're scraping small sites like this, it's just going to be slow. It's going to be like slower than you expect it to be. Again, assume that this is going to take longer to do all these images one by one than it would be to write this code, but it's still helpful to sort of like see that I was sort of like, this is slower than I expected. So last thing we want to do here, one note I did realize, like, I don't need that images list. It actually is probably just going to slow things down a little bit longer than I want to. Because there's one image per link, I'm going to run the image downloader directly from these pages. So let's go ahead and do that. So you'll see here that I get this URL pattern here for each of these images. So let's go ahead and add in our file saver. So we're going to add in the file path. So this path is what we're going to want for our output. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to do file name equals, and it's going to be image link dot split, and we're going to split at the slash. So see how here everywhere we've got a slash, 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 slash. So we're going to take the very last part of the slash, and the way to do that is with a -1. So negative numbers say from the end, give me, the last piece. So that should be their file name, and the file path for that is going to be our output plus this file name. So we're actually going to keep the JPEG, that sort of thing. So we won't worry about rewriting that part. Next, we need to check to make sure that path does not already exist. This is really, really important. One thing just from a pure ethical standpoint, while scraping is slightly nebulous in terms of scrapability, I highly recommend that you double check to see if your path already exists. So basically this is to double check to make sure we're not downloading files multiple times. Doing this sort of web scraping on small websites has the potential to really hurt their bandwidth. If you were to download, say, 10,000 images from like someone who is a small collector of images, and they're not used to having someone just come through and download every single image of their page, it's not the nicest thing. So make sure that you already check to make sure that this image isn't already loaded. So just because of this, we're going to add file name. So basically this will check to see if that image exists, and if it does, we're just going to like let ourselves know, like, hey, this file already exists in our folder. Last thing we're going to want to do is actually write to this file. So the way to do this is using this code. You don't really need to worry too much about what this is, but it might look fairly familiar because it's using a lot of the same techniques. So we're going to say with open. So, and this is, we're going to take the file name. Sorry, actually we're going to take the file path. So with file path, we're going to write to it as a file, and then the file we're going to write is request.get, and we want the image link. I believe that's correct. Yeah, because it gives us the full path here. So we want the image link. and we want the content. So now I'm again going to run this just for the single page, and then I'll stop the video and I'll do it last for the final loop around all of the pages. But let's just run this and make sure that this works the way we expect it to. None type. Okay, cool. So it's possible that image link split doesn't work. So let's try this. Let's do print image link. Just double check to see what that is. I'm going to comment all this out. So here's the deal is I want the source. I don't want just the image link itself. Or actually I want the href. So we're going to hit Control C, see what happened here. So image link, right. So what we really want is the image is going to equal image link dot get, and then it's going to be the href. And then file name is going to equal image.split of /1. Let's print the file name and make sure we got this working right. Yep, okay, so this is giving me the correct, this is what I want for the name. Let's go ahead and stop that. Turn off this print, and we'll turn off this print, and then we can turn all this back on. Our file path should still be that. And then I believe we want get. We want to get the image, not the image link. And now this should work the way we expect it to. So I'll go ahead and hit up. So our first image already exists because I, before recording this video, wanted to make sure that that download code worked. So we ran this image already exists. And then if we come over here and we look in our output folder, you'll see, yep, we're getting 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is now working. So I'm going to stop the video, let this finish running, and then when I come back, I will have written our loop to loop around our pages. Well, all of my images downloaded in that first set, so now I'm ready to go ahead and move on to scraping all the pages. So this actually ended up being really, really simple. All I ended up having to do was write a Python range function. So if you've never seen a Python range function before, this is a numerics of this is our start value, this is our stop value, and this is how many steps we're taking between it. Now the reason I'm not starting at 0 is I've already scraped the first page. So from here I want to scrape starting at 30 up to 840 and at 30 steps per page. Now the reason I know this is because when I go to this page, let's go back here a little bit. When I click through next, see how it says skip 30? If I click next again, I see skip 60. And if I click all the way to the end, I see skip 840. So this is how I knew to generate this list. And then all I did at the end of this page request was instead of where it said skip equals 0, I removed that 0 and I said plus string and the I. So I is going to go from 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, all the way up to 840. And I'm passing in the string value here, or I'm converting it to a string value, right? So it's an integer and I want it to be a string. And I start running this and we can take a look that we are now downloading a bunch of new images. Now this was really, really great. It was pretty straightforward. I hope Nowco is going to be happy with these images. There's still obviously a ton of cleanup work to do, right? So some of you hear people talk about, oh, scraping is so easy. All you do is you get images, but like you and I know there's a ton of work to be doing after this, which Nowco will have to do. But I think there's some really interesting things here in this data set. So this will probably run for probably an hour, to be honest. This is good. This is pretty slow. These images are decent resolution though. If I take a look at them, they're 1800 by 2700, so that's pretty nice. So this is a really great way to download, honestly, higher resolution images than I would find in a lot of places. And you know, it probably took me about an hour to write this and another hour to record this video because I kept screwing stuff up. But you know, this is a pretty short in terms of length of code, just a really short way to access this. And this is sort of the beauty of Beautiful Soup, is if you understand the patterns and can sort of parse through the HTML DOM, you can have a really, really powerful tool to download a bunch of tools or a bunch of images, in not that much time and not that much code. So I hope you really enjoyed this video. One thing to note is that this will change for every different page you scrape, right? So again, this is sort of the challenge, is like what I have here won't necessarily work for the next website I look at. Now there might be parts that I can pull from here and use elsewhere. If I were to get really serious about this, maybe I'd write some additional functions and create a meta library of beautiful soup tools. But this is pretty straightforward, and it's not that hard to write this. I think if you understand a little bit of HTML and maybe a little bit of Python, I think you'll be able to do this, and that's what's really beautiful about this tool. So I hope this gets you excited about using Beautiful Soup and maybe challenges you to think about scraping your own new tools. If you have questions, drop me a note on YouTube or join the Slack channel and ask some questions there. And I'll see you next time. Thanks.